Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Tiffany, but you can call me Tiff. Today guys, I'm really excited because today is my first episode of Tasty True Crime Tuesdays. I literally nearly forgot the name of it then. Let me give you a bit of a background and tell you what Tasty True Crime Tuesday is. So, a couple of weeks ago, I was laying in bed and I was thinking, what do I really love? What am I interested in? What really tickles my fancy, you know? And I was like, well, I really like food and I'm really interested in true crime. And then I had like a light bulb moment. I was like, why don't I, every Tuesday, eat my dinner with you guys and tell you about a true crime story that I've researched. So, today, ladies and gents, that's what I'm doing. I have got fish and chips here and a can of Coke, and I will be telling you about a true crime story that I have been researching. So, without further ado, let's just get into it. Before we do get started, I do just have to give a little bit of a disclaimer. This video will contain information that some people may find upsetting, so viewer discretion is advised. Delicious. Today, guys, I'm going to be telling you about the Bamba family murders. Now, if you're from the UK, you would probably know this as the White Farmhouse murders, and there was actually a TV series released last year, I believe, on BBC. So you would have heard of it if you're from the UK, I'm pretty sure. The Bamba family consisted of 6 members. That was Neville Bamba, the daddy, June Bamba, the mummy, Sheila Bamba, and Jeremy Bamba. And Sheila's 2 sons, they were twins, Daniel and Nicholas. Neville and June met between the late 30s, early 40s, I believe. I couldn't pinpoint an exact year, but that's just from my research, that's what I've kind of gathered. And they met after Neville had left the RAF. The reason that Neville left the RAF was because he actually was in a plane crash and he broke his back and he had to spend a year in hospital recovering from this accident. So after this accident and Neville left the RAF, he decided to get into the agriculture business, which is basically like farming. So he started his own company and he started a farming company. And at this particular time, June was working as a secretary in some offices, and June actually had a sister called Pamela who was dating a man called Robert. And Robert and Nev actually met through the agriculture business. So I'm not sure who introduced June and Nev. It was either Pamela or Rob, but I can't actually tell you who it was, but I just know that they met. This is a bit of a side note, but Pamela and Rob actually went on to get married later on. After dating for a couple of years, June and Neville decided to get married. They decided to buy and move into the White House farm, which this property, it was huge. I'm going to put a few pictures up on the screen for you, just so you can see, like, it was massive. It had acres of land, it had numerous bedrooms, it had 3 staircases. It was massive. So after they got married, June actually decided to quit working. She didn't want to work anymore. So she decided to stay at home and they started trying to have a family. So they were trying for a couple of years to conceive naturally. Sadly, it just wasn't written in the stars for them. They just couldn't fall pregnant naturally. So in the end, they actually decided to go down the adoption route, and both of them were devout Christians. They were very serious about their religion. So they decided to go to the Church of England Children's Society. And at the church, Neville and June found a baby they wanted to adopt. In 1957, the couple adopted their first baby, and this was Sheila Bamba. Now, Sheila was born Phyllis, so I'm going to be calling her Phyllis for the first part of this. So Phyllis was born to an 18-year-old girl, or a teenager, shall I say, and This 18-year-old was the daughter of a senior chaplain. Now, from my research, from what I can gather, a senior chaplain or a chaplain is very much like a pastor or a pastor. I don't know how to say that word. But instead of having a base, so a pastor would have like a church as their base, but a chaplain doesn't have a base. They just have a community. So this guy, he's pretty religious, right? If he's similar to a pastor. And back in those days, having a baby out of wedlock, it was just no. Like, it could not be done. It would bring shame on the family. So from what I can gather, I feel like Phyllis's biological mother was kind of forced to give Phyllis up for adoption. I don't necessarily think that she really wanted to. And funnily enough, Daddy Chaplin, so Phyllis's biological mother, her father, he actually recognised Neville's name because he worked with Neville in the RAF. So he recognised Neville's name and he was like, okay, I know this guy, he's a good guy. I want my grandchild to go to him or this couple. So I guess in some ways, he was trying to give Phyllis / Sheila the best life that she could possibly have. So Neville and June decided to adopt Phyllis. Phyllis then became Sheila Bamber. I couldn't find too much information in regards to Sheila's childhood, so I'm just kind of going to skip past that bit and just move straight on to her teenage / early adult years. And I'm also going to have a bite of my Savoy. When Sheila was 17 years old, she fell pregnant by her boyfriend Colin Caffell. And like I've mentioned earlier, Neville and June were they were devout Christians. They were very strict, they were very religious. And just like Sheila's biological mother, they were like, no, you are not having a baby out of wedlock. And they essentially forced Sheila to have an abortion. They made her get rid of the baby. And from what I can tell, this is where the relationship between Sheila and her parents just took a steep decline. So Sheila had the abortion, and from then on, she hated her parents, but especially June. She really, really seemed to hate June after that. And I feel like the feelings were mutual because it's been said in a few sources that I've seen that June actually referred to Sheila as the devil's child. And as someone that's very religious, that's a big statement. After the abortion, Sheila kind of, she picked herself up, she brushed herself off, she moved forward and she got a job as a secretary. And then a few years later, she worked as a hairdresser, and then she fell into some modelling, which I'm not really surprised by because she was stunning. A few pictures on the screen so you guys can see, like, she is absolutely beautiful. And she actually went to Tokyo for 2 months to pursue this career. And when she came back from Tokyo, her and Colin were still together and she fell pregnant again. And this time, she was like, no, I'm keeping this baby. That's it, I'm keeping it. So her and Colin actually decided to get married in 1977. And they were preparing to have their first child together. But sadly, Sheila actually miscarried at 6 months. And then she also had another miscarriage a couple of years later. So I just feel like she couldn't catch a break. And I also feel like her hatred towards her parents would have got a lot worse because she would have, this is just me speculating, but I just feel like she would have blamed them for all these miscarriages, probably thinking it's the abortion that's causing all these miscarriages, Anyway, Sheila did fall pregnant again, and this time, thank God, she gave birth to 2 healthy twin boys, Nicholas and Daniel. But for poor old Sheila, it didn't end there. Oh no. 4 months after giving birth to the twins, Colin decided to actually divorce Sheila and leave her. Now, Sheila started to suffer really badly with her mental health. It seemed like it was really, really bad. She would become paranoid, she would have fits of rage, she would become really violent, and it was also said that she would stand against the wall and just smash her head against the wall, like, consistently, just wouldn't stop. So I'm not entirely sure if her mental health had a role to play in him leaving, but I'm gonna say that it probably did have something to do with it. So after the separation, Sheila, she wasn't good. It really, really affected her. Her mental health deteriorated even further. It just sounded like she gave up, to be honest. She didn't really give a fuck. She got into a really bad friendship group, or not bad, but they were really bad influences. They did a lot of drugs, they drank a lot. Sheila became very promiscuous, sleeping with much older men. So like I said, Sheila had become paranoid. She was having these fits of rage that no one could control. She was becoming violent. So June and Neville decided to refer her to a psychiatrist. And this is when Sheila was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. Now, schizoaffective disorder is essentially a combination of two disorders. It's basically schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, but it's combined. So the person who has the schizoaffective disorder, they can show traits of both schizophrenia and bipolar. And I actually have a family member that suffers with this disorder, so I do know that it can really affect them big time, especially if they're not taking any medication for it. But like I said, Sheila, she was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder and she was given medication to take. And it said that this medication that she was given, it would make her really drowsy and really sleepy, so she couldn't really do a lot. So Sheila was receiving treatment. She was in and out of hospital, seeing this psychiatrist, and it said that, you know, she got so bad that she was actually convinced that her boyfriend at the time, not Colin, someone else, he was trying to kill her, and that the twins were the spawn of the devil. Like, she was convinced that they were the devil's children. So that's the background of Sheila. I'll move on to Jeremy now. Jeremy was born Jeremy Marsham to a student midwife, and his biological mother, it said that she was having an affair with an army sergeant who was married, and that's why she gave Jeremy up for adoption. But I've actually read that Jeremy's biological parents, so the mother and the father, actually got married. Excuse me. They actually got married a couple of years later and went on to have more children, and I couldn't find out if Jeremy ever knew that, but I would be curious to know how he felt about that if he did know. Like Sheila, Jeremy was taken to the Church of England Children's Society and was given up for adoption. And Neville and June were contacted by the Church of England Children's Society, and they were basically told, hey, we've got this baby boy, do you want him? He's 6 weeks old, if you want him, he's yours. And they were like, yep, we want a baby boy. So they brought Jeremy home, and Jeremy Marsham became Jeremy Bamber. Now, from what I can gather, Jeremy didn't seem to have much of an eventful childhood. As he got older, I think he became quite flamboyant. He liked to show off to his mates, like got a bit cocky, but I think, you know, a lot of teenage boys get to that stage. So I can gather, Sheila and Jeremy, both of them had a pretty good childhood. Their parents were wealthy. Like I said before, Neville had started his own farming company, which was doing really well. That was really successful. Him and June also decided to buy a caravan site, and they had the estate, so the actual White House farm estate. So financially, the family were pretty well off. Like, they were rich. So the kids didn't really want for anything. Jeremy and Sheila didn't really want anything. The only thing I can find that they really struggled with and they weren't interested in was, one, working on the farm. They had no interest in working on the farm, which was kind of expected of them. And two, the religious side of things. From what I can read, June was very forceful when it came to the religion. She really, really wanted them to be very religious. And Jeremy and Sheila, they weren't about that life. They didn't want to do that, or they didn't want to become as heavily involved in the religion as June and Neville. So now that I've given you like a bit of a background, I'm going to move on to the day before the murders. So on the 6th of August 1985, Sheila had come to visit her parents with the twins. I think she'd actually turned up a few days prior to the 6th. So she was at the farm with the twins, and Jeremy was also at the farm as well. He didn't live at the farm, he actually lived 3 miles away in a cottage, but he was there visiting the farm, and he was also hunting rabbits. So he was out in the fields, I guess, and he had a rifle and he was trying to shoot rabbits. I don't know if he caught anything, guess that's not really relevant, but he came back into the house. He still had the rifle, he put it on the kitchen table, still loaded, and then he went into the other room. I think it's called like a drawing room, dining room. He went into a different room where the family decided to sit down and have dinner together. And it said at this supper, a heated discussion broke out, and the heated discussion was between Sheila and her parents, so Neville and June. And I believe this discussion was about Sheila and the twins. Neville and June were telling Sheila that they didn't think that the boys would be looked after well enough by Sheila. They were worried for their welfare. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention, they actually brought up the fact that Sheila might want to consider putting the boys in foster care. Being funny. Regardless of your state of your mental health or how you're feeling at that particular time, if someone, especially your parents, hint that you should be putting your children into care because you're not a good enough parent, I think that would piss a lot of people off. A lot of parents off. I mean, that could just be me, but you know, I'm just saying. And apparently Sheila got really upset by this, which, I mean, obviously, like anyone would, I think. And Sheila started shouting at them, and you know, she got really angry because she was saying, you think I'm a bad mum, blah, blah, blah. And in the end, Sheila just ended up storming out of the room. She was like, you make me sick, I don't even want to look at you, kind of vibe. So after the discussion, the argument kind of settled, Jeremy decided to leave the farm. It was around 9:30 at night by this point. And he was like, right, well, I'm going to go home because there's no point of me being here because everyone just, you know, hates each other. So he decided to leave. He went home. 4 hours later, the Chelmsford police received a telephone call at 3:26 a.m. on the 7th of August. And this call came in from Jeremy Bamber. And Jeremy had said that he just received a call from his father, Neville Bamber, at the White House farm. And his father, and I quote, had said, your sister Sheila has gone berserk with a rifle and she's threatening to kill everybody. Send help quick. Jeremy's rang the police and he's like, can you go and check on my family? I'm really worried. I've just received this call. And they're like, yeah, no problem. Meet us there. So Jeremy ends up meeting the police at the farm around 4 o'clock in the morning. And Jeremy's telling the police about his sister, her mental health, you know, that he'd left this gun on the table when he was out hunting and it was loaded. So the police are thinking, okay, there's someone in that house that's potentially got a loaded firearm and they could be really dangerous. So we're going to wait for backup police to turn up because we just want to make sure that it's safe, which, I mean, fair enough, that's sensible. But get this, 4 hours later, 4 hours later, the armed police turn up. I mean, talk about having a fucking joke. Like, you know, there's 2 little boys in there, but also there's potentially 4 hostages, and you take 4 hours to turn up. The armed police eventually turn up and they force their way into the house because they couldn't actually get in because it was locked and the keys were still in the door. So the armed police get into the house and I'm not sure what they expected, but I don't think they expected to find the horrific scene that they walked in on. If you're eating now, like me, I would suggest maybe not eating for this part. And the first person they find is Neville Bamber. And Neville Bamber is riddled with bullets and he's been bludgeoned to death, beaten to death. So not only has he been shot, but he's been beaten as well. And he was next to the phone, so it was like he had been at the phone trying to call someone. They then made their way upstairs, and the next people or persons they found was the twin boys. And the twin boys, they were in a separate room and they were sleeping in separate beds, and they both had multiple bullet wounds in their head. I think combined they had around 8 bullets in their heads, like 8 bullets. And it's also said as well that one of them was found with his thumb still in his mouth, like he was sucking it. So they were obviously sleeping when whoever did this to them did it. Like, it just breaks my heart, just fucking why. I moved to the master bedroom, and this is where they find Sheila and June. Now June it was almost like she was trying to leave the bedroom when she was murdered, when she was shot. Half of her body was in the hallway, half of her body was in the bedroom. Her body was riddled with bullets, like absolutely covered in bullets. She was covered in blood. And then they walked into the master bedroom, and this is where they found Sheila. Now Sheila's body was very, very different to everyone else's. Sheila had 2 bullet wounds, and both of these bullet wounds were underneath her chin. And the rifle, the murder weapon, was laying on her body, I believe. The police are looking at this scene and they're thinking about all the things that Jeremy had told them, that Sheila was really mentally unstable at that particular time. They had all her notes to back it up. There had been an argument that night about putting the children in foster care. Jeremy had said that he'd left a loaded gun on the kitchen table, so Sheila would have been able to get hold of that gun. Sheila was brought up on a farm, so she was brought up learning how to handle guns. So police instantly think, okay, this is a murder-suicide. That's what we've got here. So the case is, it's open and closed. That's it. That's it. It's done. We've solved it. We're amazing. Bearing in mind that Jeremy's still outside waiting for the police to come out and say what they found. The armed police come outside and they tell the, I believe his name was Detective Jones. Detective Inspector Jones. He was the guy that was leading the investigation. They come out and they told him, this is what we found. So then Detective Inspector Jones has gone to Jeremy and said, I'm really sorry, but your whole family has been murdered. And from every source that I've read said that Jeremy absolutely broke down. He was an absolute bitch, like anyone would be. He was beside himself with grief. Like, you've just found out that your whole family's dead and they've been murdered. So like I said, the police are absolutely convinced that this is a murder-suicide. They closed the investigation the day after it happened, and they even agreed to destroy evidence. Basically, Jeremy had said, I don't want to walk into the farm and see blood-stained carpets, blood-stained mattresses, blood-stained bedding. I want you to destroy it all. And they were like, sure mate, no problem. So the case was open and shut. They didn't have to do an inquest into the murders, so they just decided to release the bodies back to Jeremy. And they said, here, have the bodies. We know you want to bury them. You know, really sorry for your loss. Crack on, basically. I need a drink. So Jeremy organised the funerals, and the funerals were held at St Nicholas's Church in Essex. Now, he asked for the adults, so Neville, June and Sheila, to be cremated and the twins to be buried. Which, I mean, he was the next of kin for all of them, so he could decide what happened to their bodies. The funeral, I feel like, is where people started to raise their eyebrows a little bit, because, you know, baby boy Jeremy, he was just doing some dodgy shit that you wouldn't expect at your own family's funeral. I'm going to try and find some clippings or videos that I can input here, but he was devastated like anyone would be. He was absolutely sobbing uncontrollably, and his girlfriend, Julie Mugford, who was there, was literally holding him up, like supporting him, because he couldn't walk. And it was said that at one point he dropped to his knees and he was like howling into the ground. Then they move on to the wake, and Jeremy just seems to recover, absolutely recover, and he's a whole different person. He's laughing, he's joking, he's fooling around with his mates. It was almost like he was celebrating. And I've also seen somewhere that Colin Caffell made a statement and actually said that Jeremy had said, I can't wait to go back to the farm with Julie, his girlfriend, and have some fun. Now, not sure about you guys, but When I've been to a funeral, the last thing on my mind is having fun. Do you know what I mean? The funeral's been held, the adults have been cremated, the twins have been buried, and now Jeremy's just kicking back. He's kicking back and he's waiting for his inheritance money. So in total, it would have been over £1 million that Jeremy would have been entitled to, and the estate of the farm, the White House farm, he would have got as well. But this wasn't good enough for Jeremy. Oh, no. He couldn't wait. He couldn't wait for the inheritance money. Instead, he decided to start selling his family's belongings. He tried to sell his mother's car to his girlfriend's mum, and I think she refused because she was like, no, that's a bit weird, mate. I'd rather not. He also put an ad in the newspaper trying to sell his dad's car for like £900. This is the kicker. He found naked pictures of Sheila, and instead of destroying them or putting them somewhere where no one would ever see them, he sold them to the Sun newspaper for £20,000. Now, you was just at the funeral, sobbing your heart out, grieving for your family that was murdered in cold blood, including your sister. And instead of trying to protect her integrity or trying to protect her name, you sell these naked pictures to the newspaper. What? So this whole scandal with the naked pictures and the newspaper, this was another situation where people's eyebrows were raised even further, because they're thinking, well, hang on a minute. Like I said, you were just, sobbing your heart out at the funeral, and now you're sending naked pictures of her to the Sun. You can't make this shit up. What are you doing? At the end of the day, the police they closed the case. They said it was a murder-suicide. That's it. The case is closed. So they decided to give the keys back to Jeremy. I'm not sure how. I don't know whether the extended family had a set of keys themselves, but Jeremy's cousins. So you remember I said that Pamela, June's sister, Pamela married Robert? Well, they wanted to have children, and these children were Jeremy and Sheila's cousins. But somehow Jeremy's cousins got hold of a set of keys, and they went to the farmhouse. They were there to start or create an inventory for the solicitors, so the solicitor knew everything that was in the house and what it was worth. And they stumbled across the gun cupboard. Now in the gun cupboard they found a silencer, and funny enough, the silencer was the silencer that would go on the gun that was used to murder the family. So the cousins took the silencer out of the box, and there was like red chippings on it, and also what looked to be like blood. So they're like, this is dodgy as fuck. So they decide to take it to the police. So the police received this silencer, right? And I think at this point, I don't know whether it was the behaviour of Jeremy at the funeral and then him selling the pictures of Sheila that made them think maybe something's not quite right here. I don't know what, but they started to think, okay, we need to look into this a bit further, a little bit deeper. So they took the silencer and they took the gun that was used, the rifle that was used, to the forensic lab, and they asked them to do some testing. And, well, this just turned the case on its head, right? So the forensic lab completed their examination, and they found that the red chippings on the silencer were from the fireplace or the mantelpiece in the kitchen. And when the police checked again, it looked as if there'd been like a struggle and the gun had been like banged against the mantelpiece. It was a silencer end, and that was like banged against the mantelpiece, and it like created dents and stuff and scratches. And the cousins said that weren't there. But forensic lab found blood in the barrel of the silencer and on the outside, and that blood was determined to be human blood, but not just any human blood. It was Sheila Bamber's blood. They then checked the rifle that was used to kill Sheila, that was used to kill the family, but there wasn't any blood in the barrel of the gun. And usually what happens if you shoot somebody, there's like blood spatter, and usually the blood spatter gets into the barrel of the gun, but there wasn't any there was only blood in the barrel of the silencer. So that means that the silencer was used when Sheila was shot. Two things that made police really stop and think. A rifle was long, a rifle was really long, and for someone to shoot themselves with it, it is possible, but it's difficult. Like, you would have to stretch to get to the trigger, do you know what I mean? So adding a silencer onto the gun, it would have made it too long. Sheila would not have been able to pull the trigger herself, it just would have been impossible. Second of all, how did the silencer get back in the cupboard? Because if Sheila had shot herself and she was dead, and everyone was dead in the house, dead people can't replace objects. So this is when police are like, hang on a minute, there's something not right here. There's something more sinister going on here. While the police are putting all this together, Jeremy, he's off. He's in Amsterdam. He's living his life. He's with his girlfriend, Julie Mugford. They're having the time of their life, celebrating. That's what it seemed like. It seemed like they were celebrating. They were going on vacation. They were spending all this money. They were having a laugh. Julie and Jeremy were in love. I mean, Julie especially, she was like head over heels for Jeremy. She absolutely adored him. Would do anything for him. She'd spoken to the police and said that Jeremy was distraught, that on the night of the murders he'd called her and said that something was wrong at home and he was worried. And that she was there to support him, and she was going to do everything she could to make sure that he got through this. This was until Jeremy decided he no longer wanted to be with Julie, alright? He wanted to break apart. He wanted to move on. Thank you for your time, Julie, but let me go now. And then Julie found out that Jeremy had been cheating on her. Julie found this out. Her story changed real quick. She went back to the police and she went, I want to change my statement. And oh honey, what she revealed was mind-blowing. She told the police that on numerous occasions Jeremy had spoken about getting rid of his family, killing his family. She said that at one point he said that he wanted to get everyone in the house and then burn the house down and let them die in the house. Then he changed his mind and said he wanted to hire a hitman to kill them. She said that he had said that his old dad and his crazy mum and sister had nothing to live for anyway, so he just wanted to kill them so he could take all the money, basically. Julie also said that Jeremy had said to her he knew how he would kill his family and get away with it. She said that Jeremy had said to her that he would get away with this because what he would do in the middle of the night, he would get on his bicycle, he would ride to the farm. Remember, he's only 3 miles away. He would ride his bicycle to the farm in the pitch black so no one would know that he was coming or no one would see him. He would enter the house through a window that was broken. So there was a window and the latch was broken so you could open it from the outside. He said that he would enter the house that way. He would do what he went there to do. He would murder the family, then make a phone call from White House Farm to his house, and then he would leave the house the same way that he had entered it. Julie also said that she had actually asked Jeremy, did you commit these crimes? Did you commit these murders? Did you kill your family? And he said, no, I didn't, but I did hire someone to kill them. And Julie also confessed that a couple of months prior to this, Jeremy and Julie had broken into the family's caravan site and stolen nearly £1,000. So because of this confession about the theft and the breaking and entering, the police actually decided to arrest Jeremy for this. But he was let out on bail. They couldn't keep him in, so they let him out on bail. And instead of going home and thinking about what he'd done and thinking about his actions, instead he decided to jump on another plane and go to Saint-Tropez. So because Julie had said that Jeremy had told her that he'd hired someone to kill the family, they brought this guy in for questioning and he had a solid alibi. So they was like, okay, well he couldn't have done it because he's got a solid alibi. You know that Jeremy said that his father had called him before he called the police? Well, the police actually got in contact with the telephone network provider and they couldn't find any trace of this call. They were like, no call was made between that time. So it would appear that no call actually existed. And do you remember I said before that when they went into the house, when the armed police got into the house, it seemed that Neville was by the phone, but there wasn't actually any blood on the receiver. Now he was covered in blood, so if he would have picked that receiver up, there would have been blood somewhere on the phone, and there just wasn't. So by this point, the police are thinking, no, this ain't right. And all this circumstantial evidence is building up against Jeremy. The day that Jeremy landed back in England from being in Saint-Tropez, the police were there and they were waiting for him, arrested and charged Jeremy for all 5 murders. So he was taken to prison and he was put in a cell, and that's where he stayed until his trial started. His trial started on the 3rd of October 1986 at the Chelmsford Crown Court, and the trial lasted for 13 days in total. The prosecution argued, as I'm sure you can guess already, that Jeremy had committed these murders out of greed and anger and hatred towards his family, and also for the fact that he didn't want to share his inheritance with Sheila. He wanted it all for himself. They obviously brought up the fact about the silencer, that if the silencer had been on the gun, there's no way that Sheila would have been able to kill herself or wouldn't be able to shoot herself. They brought up the fact that there was blood in the barrel of the silencer but not in the gun. And I think the thing that really swayed the jury was Julie Mugford, Jeremy's ex-girlfriend, took the stand as a witness and gave a testimony, and she basically told the jury everything she'd told the police. Of course, the defence argued that Julie was an absolute liar, and the only reason that she was saying this is because Jeremy had dumped her and had broken her heart, and they shouldn't believe a word of what Julie was saying. They said the evidence proved that it was Sheila that had committed these murders and then killed herself with the gun. Said that this was obvious by Sheila's past with mental health, that she'd only actually been released from an institution for her mental health a couple of weeks prior to visiting the family. They mentioned, or they brought up the fact that the family had had like a heated discussion / argument on the night before. The conversation was about the twins going into foster care. So the defence were basically saying like this was definitely Sheila, and all the evidence points to the fact that it was Sheila. The jury deliberated for nine hours. 9 hours would indicate that they were going back and forth and they were looking over the evidence, and they were really looking at the information and the evidence that they had been provided, so it wasn't an easy decision for them to make. Nevertheless, Jeremy was found guilty of all 5 murders by a majority of 10-2. So what that basically means is 10 jurors said yes, he's guilty, 2 said no, he's not. But I think the minimum there has to be to find someone guilty is actually 10 people. So if it was one less person to say he's not guilty, it would have been a hung jury, I think, and they would have had to do a retrial. Anyway, they found him guilty and he was sentenced to 5 life terms, and it was suggested that he serve at least 25 years before he's considered to be released. And I have seen from numerous sources that Jeremy has tried to appeal his, and each time this has been denied. And I've also seen that a lot of people think that Jeremy is innocent because there isn't actually any physical evidence to prove that Jeremy did this. There's no DNA, there's no blood, there's no fingerprints. His testimony is really what caused for Jeremy to be arrested and to be charged for the murder. But I just feel like surely if Julie was lying, she would have had to have told someone by now. It's been years. But I really don't know. After researching this case, I really don't know what to think, guys. But feel free to let me know what you think down below. Got a little bit of food left, but I did gave it a good go. I hope that you enjoyed this video, guys. If you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will see you next week for another tasty True Crime Tuesday. Bye, guys.